forward, just because I think the presentations today are going to have some great content, and to be able to share that when we have a chance to. So would you like to start us off with a welcome?
Yeah, I'd be glad to. Really appreciate everyone giving some time today to get on a webinar for the Next Generation Leadership Institute. I think everyone on the Zoom today is familiar with the NGLI, but maybe just a couple of words about this program and the National Conservation Foundation. About 2 years ago, the National Conservation Foundation began identifying the need to begin a leadership program for up-and-coming emerging leaders within the conservation community, and began laying the groundwork for what has become today the Next Generation Leadership Institute. And we're very excited that we've got a group of 7 up-and-coming leaders within the conservation district community. The original design for this session was to have a policy-focused leadership session in Washington, D.C. back in March. And unfortunately, around the time that we had originally scheduled this, it was going to be in conjunction with the National Association of Conservation Districts legislative slot, which was scheduled for March the 23rd. That was about 2 weeks before the District of Columbia completely closed down, and so we had to scramble quickly to make alternative plans to cancel the face-to-face meetings that we had, and also to reschedule things for a virtual environment, which I know everyone on the Zoom today has probably become very adept and skilled at doing. So we transitioned our legislative fly-in to a virtual fly-in, and visited with members of the legislature's offices the week following the original plan. And we also began working on identifying an opportunity to also hold the second session of the Next Generation Leadership Institute, which we are very fortunate to be able to do today. I'm very grateful for all of the presenters that have made time within their schedule to participate today. And just looking at the lineup that we have, we really have a good diversity of viewpoints, both from within the federal government, as well as from within organizations that do very critical work in Washington, D.C. On policy, on government affairs, representing various constituencies, various perspectives that are all important to agriculture, to conservation, to rural and urban communities all across the country. So just wanted to say a few remarks today to welcome folks. Very glad that we have been able to persevere and to make this session occur. Again, thanks to everyone for giving of your time today and for joining the webinar. Sunny, I think I'll stop there and look forward to the rest of the webinar.
Excellent. Thanks very much, Jeremy. Yeah. Our goal for today is to be able to take a little bit more of a deep dive into the topic of the policy work of some of the folks that we were going to be hearing from during the spring campaign. With that, we'll go ahead and have a round of self-introductions. We'll go ahead and start with our speakers. I'll call out your name, have you introduce yourself, your title, affiliation, and then I'll go through our cohort members as well. So, would you like to start us off?
All right, Sunny, I lost, you broke up just a bit on my end, but I can go ahead if you'd like, or anybody else.
Sure. Sorry about that. Yeah, I'll call names, and if you can introduce yourself, that would be great. Go ahead. We'll go ahead and start with the speaker presentation. Thank you for letting me know about the freeze. Kevin Norton, would you like to introduce yourself, please?
Certainly, thank you. Kevin Norton, the Associate Chief with the Natural Resources Conservation Service, it is the senior career position in the agency, reporting directly to Chief Matt Laureate, who y'all met out in Las Vegas. Been with the agency 38 years, and I'll share a little bit more when I get into my presentation. Glad to be with y'all today.
Thank you, Kevin. Jenny?
Jenny Mesereau. I'm Vice President of Government Affairs at the Farm Credit Council. We represent the institutions of the farm credit system across the country. And Matt Lohr, used to be a farm credit folk as well, so I know Matt really well, and he's great to work with.
Excellent. Great. Thank you. Ryan?
Hi, I'm Ryan Richards. I'm a senior policy analyst at the Center for American Progress. I'm on the public lands team, but I also work on agriculture and environmental policy on private lands for us. And I'll talk a little bit more about the work that we do in the presentation.
Excellent. Thank you, Ryan. Coleman?
Hey, I'm Coleman Garrison, the Director of Government Affairs for NACD. I've met several of y'all on the NGLI cohort through various NACD activities, but so some of y'all probably know a little bit what I do or get my email updates or blog posts, but looking forward to chatting with y'all later.
Thanks, Coleman. And we also have Mary Scott with us. I'm going to have you introduce yourself, Mary.
So I'm Mary Scott. I am the Natural Resource Policy Specialist for NACD, and I started with NACD about 3 months ago, and I'm looking forward to getting to know all of you and working with all of you in the future. Thanks,
Mary. Okay, so with that, we'll start with the cohort members, and I've got Barbara at the top of my screen.
Here's me. It's always good to be with a B because everyone starts alphabetically, and I'm usually right up there. And nice to meet you, Ryan. My daughter's here with me. She came down. She works with Shilpa. She's been on Zoom meetings all day with you guys. I'm here in Charlotte, North Carolina, actually transplanted down from Northern Virginia in 2013. And so for Kevin, I'll date myself. So I used to call on ag when I was with SAP and Oracle. I called on Soil Conservation Service and ASCS. I don't think those groups exist anymore. But I think Soil Conservation Service became NRCS, but I'm dating myself. Nobody else has heard of these except me. And anyway, I'm here as supervisor for Mecklenburg Soil and Water Conservation District and getting extremely interested in urban agriculture and learning from all my fellow cohorts in their fantastic group. So I'm looking forward to hearing more.
Okay, thanks, Barbara. And Joe, I've got you next.
Sure. Thanks, Sonny. Joe Coughlin here from Northern Oklahoma, farmer rancher on the local K County Conservation District Board, and also serve at the State Association as a vice president. Very much enjoying the NGLI inaugural year, and just appreciate all you all being here today. Thank you.
Thanks, Joe. Okay, Phil's next.
Good morning. Hi, Phil Campbell here, Oklahoma County Conservation District, also on the state board as one of 5 of the commissioners of the state of Oklahoma. We've got a small Angus herd that we raise here. This has been a tremendous program, and thank you to each and every one of the presenters for taking the time out to be here today. And hats off to the dynamic duo is what I call them, and for keeping us all together, and looking forward to this session. Hopefully that went through.
Yep, it did. I heard you loud and clear. Thanks very much, Phil. Okay, how about you, Samantha?
Oh, where'd I go?
I can hear you.
Okay, Sam Steiner. I'm from southwestern Ohio. I serve on the Warren County Soil and Water Conservation District Board and also am an area director for the state. I raise beef cattle, chickens, and turkeys, and just been trying to keep people fed around here and staying busy with that, and looking forward to this presentation. Thanks for coming.
Thanks, Sam. How about you, Cassie? Yes.
Hi, everyone. I'm Cassie Spears, Senior. I'm a member of a federal recognized tribe here in the great state of Rhode Island, Narragansett tribe. I also sit on the National Tribal Policy Group. I'm the president of the state association, and also vice on the Southern District Conservation. But yeah, I'm very pleased to be here, and I really look forward to listening to the speakers today. Thank you.
Thanks, Cassius. Ryan, I can see you're multitasking, but I know how capable you are, so I'm going to go with you.
All right, if you can hear me, I apologize. I promise I'm headed back to the office. Had to make a quick parts run. We've been pumping storm water and doing all kinds of fun things. But yeah, my name is Ryan Britt. I serve on the Randolph County Soil and Water District Board in North Central Missouri, and also serve as the president of the Missouri Association of Soil and Water Conservation Districts, and very much have enjoyed our time on the Leadership Institute and the brief time that it has been so far, but very much appreciate the work that Sunny and everyone has done, and looking forward to the presentation today. And I will get back to the office and try not to make so much noise. I apologize.
Okay, drive safe. And we also have Mark Masters. I can see you're on.
Yeah, hey, Sunny. I didn't turn my video on. I didn't want to make anybody jealous. I'm multitasking too. I'm just, looking at the beautiful waters of the Gulf of Mexico, sitting on the beach. We all needed a change of scenery, so yeah, I may join by video later, but appreciate the chance to be on as always. Thanks for you, especially Sunny, you and Ray, for putting all this together. I'm Mark Masters with the Lower Chattahoochee Soil and Water Conservation District. That's down in Southwest Georgia. My family and I raise beef cows and a few other things. Local supervisor there, also on the state board for the Georgia Association of Conservation Districts. When I'm not doing that, I'm director of the Georgia Water Policy Center, and have been fortunate enough to work with a number of folks on this call with NACD and NRCS and various research and outreach programs over the years. So happy to be here and looking forward to it.
Great. Thanks very much, Mark. And of course, as always, you've got Ray Ledgerwood and me, Sunny Hikes-Napton, and Washington, Montana. So with that, we'll go ahead and get started. So we do have our speakers using some PowerPoint presentations. So that will be one of the screen share transitions that you'll see for the speakers. I'll send you a quick chat message when you're 5 minutes or so towards the end. So we're on time, and we've got Kevin Norton starting up. Ray, if you can stop your share screen, and then Kevin can engage his. And I'll go ahead and mute me, and y'all might want to do the same.
Sunny, can you tell me when it's displayed for everyone?
It looks great.
Okay, wonderful. I'll get started. Well, it's really quite an honor to be with y'all today. And I want to share a little bit of background from me. I am from Oklahoma originally. I was born and raised in the southwestern part of the state on a very diverse agricultural operation of peanuts, cotton, watermelons, milo, wheat, and then we baled hay and had Angus purebred cattle. So that's the world I grew up in. Raised show pigs because I couldn't afford to keep myself in the show steer business with the price that things were. But I did come from an agriculture background and really cut my teeth across the western part of Oklahoma. I was hired on by the Soil Conservation Service and proudly served with them for 13 years before we transitioned to the Natural Resources Conservation Service to better reflect that broad group of, or that broad base of conservation work that we do that is very much beyond the work of the just soil erosion. And I'm having trouble getting my PowerPoint to advance. I'm gonna reshare it here and see if we can get this thing to work. There we go. Now let's see if it'll advance. There we go. Y'all, and to go beyond that, whenever I started with the Natural Resources or the Soil Conservation Service, I want to take y'all back to your positions. I started in the Comanche County, Oklahoma field office with the Soil and Water Conservation District Board, and they were very active. And whenever I sat down at their board meeting as a range conservationist, and I provided the conservation plans that I'd been working on that past month, they really drilled into me around what I was seeing on the land, what the individual's goals were, the kind of things that helped shape the way they wanted to provide service to their customers, our customers, and how we wanted to move conservation forward in Comanche County. As I moved to Harper County in far northwest Oklahoma, as you get out towards the Panhandle, really the heart of the Dust Bowl, again, a very active, a very aggressive conservation district, providing services to that local community. I went from a very large urban centric with folks that were connected not only to the farm but to the community of Lawton, to a very rural 3,000 people in the whole county. You really could know almost every farmer rancher that you work with in that part of Oklahoma. So districts have been formative to me. And then when I moved on through my career, always maintained connectivity to those soil and water conservation districts in the western third of Oklahoma that I worked with. And then with the state leadership, both the state association and the state commission. I was a part of the NRCS team attached to the inaugural leadership class for conservation district supervisors there in Oklahoma, and carried through to the next two classes after that. So just a great experience. And, you know, I am probably a reflection of my experience and time working with soil and water conservation districts. And I just want to let y'all know you're important. You're very much a part of the success of the conservation partnership across this great landscape of America, and your value to helping us move our local, our folks forward at the local level and delivering the important conservation services is critical. As y'all met Chief Lohr, you realize that he has, or you know that he has redone our mission and vision. It was a team effort. He shared that at NACD meeting, and I've just put it up here as a reminder of the broad amount of conservation work that we pay attention to day in and day out. And truly, there is no place in the United States of America that we are not important. When it comes to private lands conservation, our mission, our vision, and that shared leadership that we have with soil and water conservation districts is critical to the success. Just from a policy perspective, I just wanted to share with you the leadership of our agency. I can pitch this PowerPoint presentation on to Sunny, and she can share it back with you. But our structure pretty much is the chief is the head of the agency. Then I'm the associate chief, and beneath me, all of the deputy chiefs for science and technology, programs, management strategy, our administrative unit, and then soil science and resource assessment. They all report to me as I work to maintain the overall technical and programmatic and administrative parts of the agency. The chief, the regional conservationists that work with your state conservationists, all report directly to the chief, and it's a clear line of sight from that field office all the way up through the state office to the chief. So that's kind of our structure at the national level. You will more than likely, and more times than not, will engage directly with our state conservationists. And the chief is very focused on us having a strong partnership, building relationships at the local and state level, and with those relationships, learning, partnering and teaming together for successful conservation delivery at the local level to our broad customer base. We're located, as you're well aware, over 3,100 field offices and locations across the country. We have 25 plant material centers, and then we have our technical centers, and all of this is built to support what y'all are doing out at the local soil and water conservation district level, our local field offices. I continue to remind the leadership here in Washington, D.C. that we only have a job if they're successful in the field. Everything that we're funded to do has a direct connection to a local field office, a local watershed, plant materials development in a regional level, soil surveys at the county, major land resource area. Everything all works its way down to our measurables or what we're getting done in the field. So it's really important that we keep our focus on moving conservation forward at the local level, and it all happens through soil and water conservation districts and that relationship at the local level. The birth, we were established in 1935. The birth of our agency was not the big show it is today, because we were just absolutely not as effective as we should be. And our chief, Hugh Hammond Bennett, worked with the Secretary of Agriculture and the President of the United States, and they shipped out the Model Soil Conservation District Law in 1937. 2 years after we were established as the Soil Conservation Service. Through that local leadership, that local connectivity, we began to connect with the local resource issues and have a program that was reflective of what was necessary. What works in North Carolina will not work in Oklahoma. I'm familiar with both of the soil and water conservation districts, my friends from Oklahoma, and definitely North Carolina looks nothing like the central plains of Oklahoma, and right on that transition line between the high plains and the prairies and the cross timbers and the forested regions of Oklahoma. But local officials helping us direct our conservation movement. Our employees are trained technical specialists. They're very knowledgeable in the sciences. Sometimes, as we're finding today, they're not as connected to agriculture as maybe I was whenever I came into the agency, straight from the farm, college, and into the agency. But our folks know conservation. They know soil and water conservation, and they're there to grow within that community and to provide that assistance to the folks there on the ground. We have a suite of programs, over 30 programs, and they're in two buckets. One is discretionary programs. That means they're appropriated annually. Congress has to take specific action to put money into these programs and to keep them moving forward. I've highlighted the green ones there are organic programs. They have been with us since the very foundation of the agency. Conservation technical assistance to private landowners, our plant materials program, putting the right conservation plants in place to cover and to address the wind and water erosion issues of the day, and to actually, not just to set it aside like the CRP does, but those plant materials also were built to provide a functional agriculture purpose beyond the conservation purpose. And so they were tied to grazing resources, shifting crop production to grazing lands, or treating, stabilizing gullies, doing those kinds of things. And then our soil survey, which is the foundation that we build all of our conservation planning activity on. Over time, these programs have grown. We have a number of discretionary programs. You'll see there the watershed and flood prevention program. Districts are by and large out of 20-something thousand structures, they probably are the local sponsor on 90% of them. We have some that are not directly connected to soil and water conservation districts, but by and large, they are our #1 sponsor for our watershed works of improvement. And then you can see the other programs that have come along. One of them, I'm sorry, Barbara, that has not got added to this list is the Office of Urban Agriculture. So I do apologize for that, but it is a new discretionary program. It surprised a lot of people that it ended up in NRCS. Even the authorizers on the Hill was like, how did y'all get this? And it's like, we showed up, talked about all the things that were going on around the country in urban conservation. And the deputy said, sounds like it belongs to NRCS, but I want y'all to make it a department-wide effort. You don't own this program. You're a steward for the rest of the department. So we'll get to that probably with your questions. Then we come to the Farm Bill. The 1985 Farm Bill was the first Farm Bill that carried a solid conservation title with it. It really only authorized the Conservation Reserve Program as the only cost share program that was in that, but it did establish the compliance provisions and the wetland compliance provisions that we still deal with today in terms of eligibility for programs. But by 1990, it started transitioning into a broader suite of conservation programs. 1996 was the big change with consolidating the Great Plains Conservation Program, Agriculture Conservation Program, ACP, those old, and Barbara probably remembers those from her time in dealing with us. There was a whole different set of acronyms we dealt with, but 1996 transitioned us to the Environmental Quality Incentive Program, Farm and Ranch Land Protection Program, Wildlife Habitat Incentive Program, Wetland Reserve Program, a whole different suite of programs. But they come through the Farm Bill. We have seen the conservation component of the Farm Bill grow. It still is dwarfed by the nutrition title, but if you'll look at this slide, you see that conservation and commodities carry about the same weight in the authorization of the Farm Bill. Now, commodities with market facilitation payments, CFAP, and some of those other things, you're going to see that grow, but we still are a major component of the funding that is delivered through the Farm Bill. So we have about 7% of the total of $428 billion in outlays. These are the programs that y'all are familiar with. You hear about them around your conservation district table. We are busy. As y'all are aware, the bill was passed in 2018. December of 2018, we spent last year rolling out the interim rules. We're allowed by law to bypass the proposed rules and to move forward with the interim rules. So we're now taking all the comments that we received and we're building out the final rules. All this time, we're still allowed to implement the programs, and that's what's going on. So I was asked to talk a little bit about COVID and where we're at and the changes it has made to our agency, and I think y'all are all too familiar with them. But essentially, we kind of closed up our operations for public access. We limit the number of folks in the office. Originally, the discussion was just one person per office, but social distancing is the key. And we are allowing our people to be there as long as they can stay 6 feet apart if they've got individual office space. So we allow the district conservationists to make some judgments around that in coordination with the state conservationists. We've seen districts that have closed up because the state mandated that all state and sub-state units stay home. So that's just a part of the partnership. Y'all are Y'all are more connected to state government, and that's the strength of our partnership, is we have that local, state, and federal partnership. But we have flexed and tried to adapt across the way, but we still have to maintain the health and safety of all of our employees together. And so the social distancing has been the driver of that. We've been able to get to the field. We've been able to work with people. I think what we're going to see as a change is this very thing right here. We are going to be doing more of this face-to-face kind of interaction, but it's going to be through a computer screen or a TV monitor or something of that nature, which will allow us to be more efficient. I think when you're not having to spend all the time traveling from one location to another, and you can have a quality meeting, and we are getting some really good interaction with our meetings that we're having. So I think this is a change. We're going to see technology move forward. It literally, this stuff has been available to us for a long time, but we've honed it now to a skill, and the fear of using it has kind of gone away. I think we're going to see our interaction with our producers change a little bit. We will never be able to replace what you see in that left-hand corner or even the upper right-hand corner where we're face-to-face with a producer on their property. That's still critical. Well, we should never walk away from that original foundation of putting technical people in the field with an agriculture producer on their field, their farm, and it becoming the major classroom for how to advance conservation and agriculture productivity. So that won't change, but how we get there sometimes may. We have got some really neat things that have happened with our servicing our programs, doing it by phone. Producers saying, I don't have an email account. Well, does your wife have an email account? Or does your husband have an email account? Yeah. Can we shoot this to them? Oh yeah, you can do that. And then we get it all taken care of and it comes back. They say, well, neither one of them, neither of the spouses have an account. Well, what about your kids? Oh yeah. Can we send stuff to them? Oh yeah. So we're able to keep things moving. It's just getting past that saying, okay, you can't do it, so we can't help you. It's trying to find that path forward to success, and I think that's been good. The change we made between Toolkit and Conservation Desktop, I know y'all have probably heard a lot about it, but I will tell you, in the old framework, and I was on with a bunch of field office people from Nebraska yesterday, and literally, if we had been in the old environment, we would not be able to service anyone right now. Our computers, the telecommunication lines, what's happening there with Phil, we would not be able to get things across the finish line. So I think we see that. We bought a lot of surveying equipment that's single person. Oh, what a blessing. I mean, one person can go to the field and survey and get the field work done because we couldn't put two people in a vehicle and they both feel safe. So we've just had a lot of challenges, but it's just been phenomenal how folks out there at the local level have stepped up. Even situations where we got an NRCS vehicle going here, and then here comes a district person in their own vehicle meeting the person, and they're doing the surveying work out in the field. Just a true team effort, a lot of success. And then the final thing, and I know I've ran out of time, but we have had issues with the impacts on the supply stream for our meat and poultry products, and being able to take the program like EQIP that has some broad authorities and provide some help to producers that are in a very bad situation. And there is not a single person that we're dealing with in this idea of addressing carcass disposal and depopulation. There's no one wants this as their option. It is not where they want to be. And in the darkest of days as a producer, when you're having to look at animals that you have brought to this point and there's nowhere to go with them, to be in this position that we can offer at that local level a little bit of assistance. It does not near cover the cost of what they're dealing with, but we can offer them a little bit of assistance to help them get through this time and hopefully maintain their operation and continue production in the future. So with that, I'll kind of wrap up. As y'all are aware, FSA has rolled out their Coronavirus Food Assistance Program, CFAP, and we're continuing to put that out there so folks are aware that now's the time for them to call their local Farm Service Agency office. Even if you've never been a traditional producer that is connected with FSA and their program offerings, now's the time to reach out and visit with them about whether this program can help you through this difficult time. With that, I'll conclude and thank you very much with this final thing. We are all partners in conservation, and I believe it. I really do. Thank you.
Excellent. Thanks very much, Kevin. We probably have time for a question if anybody would like to ask one. Or maybe we can go through that at the end if folks want to just kind of noodle on it for a little bit. All right, Jenny Mesereau, we have an ability to share your screen as well.
I do. I might go ahead. I might talk for a few minutes and then share. I don't have a formal PowerPoint for you all this morning or this afternoon, but I do have a couple of things to share with you. So I'll just get started by introducing myself again. Jenny Mesereau with the Farm Credit Council. We are the National Trade Association for all of the 72 institutions that make up the Farm Credit System. They are all over the country, all over the 50 United States and Puerto Rico. We were established in 1916 to be a dedicated lender to farmers, ranchers, and rural communities. And we've been servicing that mission for over 100 years now. And we're really proud of the work that we do, both with the large producers, small producers, and everybody in between, as well as rural electric, rural water, and rural telecom providers. So, we have customers, everyone from, feedlots and cattlemen to 10,000 acres of corn and soybeans in the middle of the country to an operation that grows micro lettuces on rooftops in Brooklyn. So we lend to everybody. I've been with Farm Credit now 9 years. Before that, I did rural and agriculture policy work on the Hill. So not a farm kid, I'm from South Florida, but have been in the agriculture space for 15 years now and enjoy every minute of it. Normally in a presentation like this, and what I plan to do with y'all in March was a little bit more of a political update, but I thought what's obviously more pressing and probably more interesting at this point is what we've seen, both the shifting in what we do on the lobbying front and the government affairs front, as well as sort of our customers and what they're experiencing and how they're shifting and adapting. So as a trade association, our job is to represent both farm credit institutions and therefore our customers, because each farm credit institution is a co-op, so they're owned and operated by their customers, before Congress and the administration. So my job is to make sure members of Congress, their staff, members of the administration, and other trade groups like Farm Bureau, et cetera, understand the unique opportunities and challenges facing not just farm credit institutions, but the customers we serve. So around this time, generally, we, as crazy as this sounds, we would be talking about what makes sense, what producers are starting to need and see in regards to the Farm Bill. Even though the next Farm Bill process, the next Farm Bill won't pass until hopefully 2023, the process begins fairly early. So we were starting to put together our strategy for, what we would be looking for in the next Farm Bill. When the pandemic hit, everything went out the window. Congress obviously shifted everything that they were doing, and therefore the priorities of farm credit and what we needed to do to represent ourselves and our customers changed dramatically. The first thing we did was, all of our farm credit institutions assessed the situation and started to communicate immediately with their customers about what we could do to help. So how do you work with customers on an individual level from a loan perspective to give them flexibilities to continue to operate? So, re-amortizing loans, rolling short-term debt into long-term debt, interest-only payments for a while, those sorts of things, really working with customers to shore up their operations. From there, it was about understanding the federal programs and working with Congress to help them understand the needs of agriculture so that the federal programs that were being rolled out really, really quickly made sense. And at first, I'm sure some of you know, it took a little while. There were some kinks. So we spent an enormous amount of time in April and May figuring out the PPP loan program. And, farm credit, we work a ton with FSA and NRCS and, the B&I loans through USDA, but we don't have any experience really with SBA because there's not a ton of agricultural lending going through the Small Business Administration. So helping SBA understand the uniqueness of farm credit, our customers, the types of loans that they need, and how their operations and their employee structure may be different than your traditional small business. So that was a lot of communication, a lot of education, a lot of hurdles to overcome. But both with the cooperation of SBA and their staff, our staff, and Congress making some tweaks in the second round of the COVID relief bills, we were able to make some changes that made the PPP program and EIDL eventually work better for agriculture. The other thing that we've been experiencing is, obviously agriculture, no matter what part of the industry you're in, to some extent, is experiencing immense challenges right now. And we were getting a ton of questions from the Hill, from folks who, they understand that a tomato isn't grown in the grocery store. But there's not a ton of knowledge about how the tomato gets from the farm gate to the grocery store or to the restaurant. So there's this sort of education gap because folks never really had to think about it before. So we thought, okay, how can we educate people in a really honest way that lets them ask really basic questions from producers themselves? So we shifted from, in-person lobbying on the Hill to bringing the voices of our customers to members of Congress and their staff, to the administration, and to, the media in a virtual platform. So we've created a series of virtual panel discussions that feature an industry expert, as well as, as several farm credit customers. And the conversation, it's really about the basic understandings of how food is grown, and then how that interacts with the food supply chain, both in the United States and across the world. We started the conversation with livestock producers because the media, there was just so much information, both true and false, floating around out there about, what was going on in the cattle industry, what was going on in pork, what was going on in poultry. The euthanization of animals obviously was sensational news. So we wanted to help people understand why farmers would have to do that and explain to them, while the price of meat may be going up in the stores, or you may not be able to get pork, they didn't understand why a producer would then be euthanizing animals if they couldn't find pork in their grocery stores. So helping folks understand the supply chain, why what the processing needs are, how to keep workers safe in processing facilities, what people needed to do on their farms to keep employees safe, and walking the media and folks through that process. So we did it again with specialty crops, and I'll kind of show you what that looked like. So this is what our panel looked like, specialty crops. And we called it fruits and vegetables because at a very basic level, a lot of members of the media, and frankly, a lot of folks on the Hill, don't know what a specialty crop is. So we wanted to help them understand, specialty crops and then, fruits and vegetables, and that they're the same thing, and really walk folks through the challenges in the specialty crop world and why a producer may be, disking under hundreds of acres of fresh vegetables because of either labor shortages or, packing facilities not being able to have the same amount of employees as they normally would for safety reasons, and how that all, again, impacts the food supply chain. And that
while you, again, may be paying for more at the grocery store, American farmers and ranchers are not getting rich because of that. They are truly struggling. And educating folks about what that struggle looks like, and hopefully through that educational process, helping the Hill and the administration and USDA and others and the media understand how they may help producers as we continue to navigate, both the, this pandemic and the recovery from this pandemic, because the impacts on agriculture and the food supply chain, I think we're learning more and more every day, are going to last at least for months, if not maybe for years. And our job has really shifted from a purely, lobbying perspective into a real educational role and helping folks understand the challenges that are out there, and hopefully setting up some future conversations for future legislation of additional assistance for agriculture producers. So with that, that's sort of the setup of what we're working on. I'm happy to take questions at the end. I'm also happy to talk to you about the election. We're the hybrid of policy and politics. So if you've got election questions or things that I normally would have talked to you about, happy to have that conversation. I just thought, with the timing and what was going on, how we're educating people and the challenges that are out there was more important.
Yeah, excellent, Jenny. Are there any questions for Jenny on this, or should we dive into a little bit of the election topic?
Actually, Jenny, so this is Barbara. You mentioned you were educating with this panel of experts, elected officials. Did I understand that right? Oops, can you hear me? Can you hear me okay?
Jenny, I think you're
Barbara, I can hear you, but I think Jenny might have frozen.
Yeah.
Should I repeat the question? I think hers froze.
No,
Whoops.
There we go. She's unshared. Jenny, are you live there?
Sorry about that.
Okay. Okay, go ahead and repeat your question, Barbara.
My question, Jenny, was when you conducted this panel of explaining the supply chain and so forth, these were to elected officials on the Hill or their staff. Did I understand that correctly?
Elected, yes. So members of Congress, their staff, we had a bunch of USDA folks sign in. For these, the interest has been actually really encouraging. We've had over 300 people dial in for these and stay on for the duration of the conversation. So we feel like as long as people are interested in the content, we'll continue to do them. So we're planning dairy next, and then maybe seafood.
And so how are you gauging whether they understood what you were saying?
So, it's hard to know exactly what people are taking away from it. My personal opinion is I think the producers that represented their industries did a really good job of breaking it down in a really simple way. And we do a lot of pre-conversation to help with that. But I will say the questions, the follow-up questions we get from the Hill have all signaled to me that people are thinking about things differently than they maybe would have. And then stories that have come out in the, mainly the ag media, but, in Bloomberg and some other publications, I think have been much more thoughtful and much more, frankly, truthful about the food supply chain challenges than they maybe would have been. And we hope that we are impacting that a little bit when they're quoting our panelists.
Sure. So when you did these presentations, were you also including a very specific ask?
So, we haven't been including a specific policy ask per se. Some of our individual producers in their individual industries needed things that maybe not everybody needs. So we said, if there's something specific, for instance, the pork producer talked a lot, and this was before CFAP came out and before the indemnity payments came out. They were very vocal about needing assistance for both the cost of euthanization as well as the cost of burial for hogs. So they took that and went with it, and I think members of Congress in the Hill heard that. The cherry guy talked about the ripping out of
of trees and what that meant, and sort of thinking through assistance in that space. So, you know, aside from thanking and additional PPP funding and, you know, thanking USDA and Congress for what they provided already, we haven't made specific asks yet.
Mm-hmm. And have you connected the producers and the people on the Hill to, I mean, you mentioned supply chain, which I understand, but have they made the connection to the food system in terms of dealing with food access and, you know, food insecurity and all? Those are more of the sort of social economic when it comes to, you know, the other neighborhoods, because that's something that I'm trying to address here in Charlotte, but you can't do it exclusively. It has to be integrated as part of the entire message.
Yeah, we did. So particularly on the fruit and vegetable side, it's harder on the protein sector side. Just, you know, what do you do? You can't donate a whole hog. But on the fruit and vegetable side, we did have a conversation about folks in Florida. So fruit and vegetables is different regionally, right? So a lot of people are just starting to harvest. So their ability to donate product that they can't sell to a food bank or to the food box program, et cetera, that hasn't occurred yet. And they don't know how much product they're going to have that they can't sell yet, because they don't know what their contracts are going to end up. They know what their contracts are now, but they don't know how much of that contract is going to be honored. So our Florida representative was great about explaining how he got lettuce into boxes for hospitals for frontline workers, how he got boxes to food banks, and how he got boxes to the community. Just basically said, a bunch of farmers came together, we all put fresh produce in a box, line up with your car, we'll throw it in your trunk as you drive by, kind of thing. And there were some folks who expressed the challenges they're facing with the contracts that were given out for the USDA food bank program, and kind of figuring out how to work through that, and you know, some of the obstacles they were facing in getting their product into those boxes.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, my pleasure.
It's a huge subject.
Yeah, absolutely. And I'm happy to sort of walk through any of this more offline too.
Talk later. That's fantastic.
Yeah, that's great questions, Barbara, and great insights, Jenny. We certainly appreciate that. All right, so Ryan, yeah, there we go. Okay, excellent.
I'm still here. Yeah. I'll see if I can get my screen shared and get this going. All right. I'm assuming that made it.
Yep, we're seeing your CAP rural policy and COVID-19.
All righty. Well, yeah, so that's the talk. That's me. Thanks you all for having me on. I wanted to start off with just a bit of a longer introduction to myself than I had up there at the beginning, just to give you a little bit of context to where I'm coming from. So I'm based in DC, but from actually Northern California. That picture on the top left there is the Shasta Valley. That's Mount Shasta in Northern California. Grew up in a town called Wairika. Was actually born in Stockton, California, which is sort of the mouth of the Delta and the center of the Central Valley. So grew up in a lot of ag country, first row crops and orchards and such, and then moved up into a lot of ranch land. That's high desert up there. So used to work a lot when I was young with the Shasta Valley Resource Conservation District. So it's pretty exciting to be talking to Conservation District folks again. The picture there on the bottom right is a little more recent. This is the mountains just outside of Sao Paulo, Brazil, which is where I did my PhD research. So I worked with farmers just outside of the city of Sao Paulo, but a very rural place that's shifting around a lot between coffee, cattle, eucalyptus, and worked on kind of how to design programs similar to what NRCS has to pay farmers to protect water sources, because this is where the city of Sao Paulo gets their drinking water. So, you know, grew up around ag, even though I'm not actually from a ranching family or anything myself. And then have been trying to spend more of my career involved in that. And actually, kind of as a result of this work in Brazil, I crossed paths with NACD a couple of years ago. I don't know if Jeremy would remember this or not, but their annual meeting was out in West Virginia, and it aligned with a conference on behavioral economics and ag. So first got to chat with folks there. So it's really nice to be staying engaged with private lands conservation. So on to the Center for American Progress, your CAP itself. For some of you, obviously, the reputation precedes it. That'd be looking at you, Barbara. Your daughter works, we used to be office mates, building mates, but now we all are scattered to the breeze until whenever. But this is our mission statement. I figured it's just kind of a nice summary of what CAP defines itself as. The things that I'd like to really emphasize here is that it's an independent, nonpartisan policy institute dedicated to improving the lives of all Americans through bold, progressive ideas. What that means, why I gave that to you as some framing, is that while I've worked an awful lot, in the weeds on type of calculations, or say like a dairy farmer's got to make in the hills out in Brazil, this is much more of a situation where we think at broader strokes about what kinds of policies would be would achieve sort of or would match with our values or progressive values, and then also satisfy or be a solution to problems that we see. Another reason that we have this kind of high level approach is that we just cover a lot of issues at CAP. We have teams working on economic policy, health policy. We have a women's initiative, which is Barbara, the team that Robin works on, right? We're in immigration policy. I myself am on the energy and environment team. We also have others that cover very focused policy issues, race, ethnicity, various other poverty specifically. So the energy and environment team is about 25 people, split into two big groups, one of which focuses on climate, both international and domestic aspects of climate change and how to address it. And then my team, which is a public lands team, sits under a conservation team. Public lands is named that principally because their focus in the past has been on Department of Interior policy rather than USDA. I feel like I'm trying to shift that frame a little bit more to cover all lands and really enjoy the opportunity to do so. But because it started that way, especially because of a federal focus, because it's a DC-based think tank, that's sort of how it's been structured in the past. So I wanted to talk, also just give you a quick overview of what I would have discussed a bit before March. We had kind of these broad buckets correlated with those two different teams on, okay, what is a policy framework that would help us address climate change? Ours is sort of branded as a 100% clean future, which follows IPCC recommendations to try to chart a path towards reducing our emissions to achieve that goal by 2050. The public lands team and the oceans team focused on a project that was kind of shaped around this motto of 30 by 30, protecting 30% of US lands and oceans by 2030. I'll talk a bit more about it, but that includes things like new national parks for sure, wildlife refuges and such, and stronger protections for federal lands. But I personally have also been working to try to figure out how we shape and define and better support private lands conservation, be that through easements and through investments in restoration, and other ways to support rural livelihoods. So a couple of examples of work that we've done in the not so distant past. Worked with a couple of colleagues of mine on a climate piece very, very early in this year, which feels like forever ago, specifically carving out, this 100% clean future project took us several months to do. It was released fall of last year, and that addresses things like electricity, transportation, industrial policy, and all of this stuff, but also covers lands, both agriculture and conservation, so things like national forests and such. So worked a bit on what actually some of these recommendations, a lot of which are improving or increasing support for NRCS programs, what that would do to support agricultural communities specifically, but also forest and timber dependent communities as well. So that's kind of an example of the analytical work that I would do. The picture on the left there is, I think, kind of a neat partnership that's a little dated now, but Kevin had mentioned the 2018 Agricultural Improvement Act. as those discussions were going on, we were looking at kind of the broad suite of issues within the Farm Bill that are important to different progressive audiences. Nutrition title being one for sure, and conservation title being another. And had also, we've interacted in the past with other think tanks in the DC area, regardless of their sort of maybe perspective or lens through which they look at the world, right? And so our Street Institute, probably not a very well-known organization like ours, like we're all DC bubble-y type organizations. And so, but give you a quick summary of what our Street is they're a free market think tank, focused very much on smart spending from the federal government. And so we worked with them to think through, okay, what aspects of things like the Regional Conservation Partnership Program or other tools that the NRCS has, what do we both kind of feel makes a heck of a lot of sense after talking with folks that come from perspectives such as y'all, and then also just drawing from our own backgrounds. So, we do these different types of projects that really kind of, focus on either what a lot of folks in their new ideas that need to get more attention, and or their ideas that don't receive enough attention, which is that piece on the right there, or their kind of quick facts, like the additional $8 billion to rural communities comes from a combination of cost savings and also funding through NRCS through programs like EQIP that you're already familiar with. So those are kind of the different levels that we tend to approach conservation. So just wanted to give you that for some context. Now, those different 2020 projects, they definitely have been affected by COVID-19. And I think that, we haven't necessarily forgotten them, but there's an awful lot of demand right now for folks, similar to what Jenny had said, to be thinking very near term, how do we just get through this, right? And that's less of a wheelhouse for the energy environment team, I think, specifically, because a lot of folks are thinking about healthcare and health policy right now. When do states open up? How long do you stay closed? What do you need in terms of testing? That's really taking up a lot of folks' time. And then there's also the just astounding economic impacts of trying to contain this. And so thinking about what unemployment supports would be necessary and for how long to try to help get a handle on stuff. But where it starts to become maybe a bit more related to the places y'all are coming from is, or at least from the issue areas y'all are coming from as folks who are involved in resource conservation work, is, what are ways that smart spending and support to try to help get through this and make sure folks don't end up even worse off than they already are. What are those types of jobs? Where do they come from? And I think that that's one of the places where I see there being, opportunities in the near term to elevate, solutions that address some of the issues that folks are facing in the agricultural community. I think that issues of, things like conservation easements or other tools to try to get more cash in folks' pockets, for instance, is one way to do it. There's also investments in restoration and other stewardship activities that I think we'll be engaging with in the future that, try to help folks out. There's one thing I think I forgot to end up sliding in here, but I did give you a link for it. Is that, I mentioned earlier that we're a multiple issue think tank, and there's so many different people working on so many different things that we don't necessarily get out of bubbles. We're on different floors in the same building. Even I like the Women's Initiative is 9 floors, I think, away from where I sit when I used to sit in the office. So we've actually started about a year and a half ago to at least have meetings with folks who work on rural issues specifically, just because there is so much overlap, that that it doesn't make a whole lot of sense for one hand to be talking about one thing, especially in like the economic policy team, and not to be talking to someone like me, for instance, who works on like forest restoration jobs, for instance, on national forest land or something like that. So drop these links here, and I'm happy to share them with folks in case they find them interesting, just to get a sense of the kind of work that CAP is doing. I would also, just if you all don't mind, put a personal plug in here at the end, is that, you know, I really value having grown up in the situations that I have. The Shasta Valley, for instance, is a really interesting case study in a number of different ways that folks have either come together or not to try to address resource conservation concerns, salmon and irrigation being one of the really big ones, right? But, you know, I think that having that perspective has made my work or my contributions to CAP be a lot more valuable. And I love talking to folks about what they experience and see in other parts of the world. I know that's someone from Chattahoochee, right? So, you know, for instance, that's a whole different type of water conflict going on in that region. It's a much different story from what you'd see in Missouri or Oklahoma too. So, you know, if any of y'all are interested in learning more, I'd love to chat and just hear about how things are going for you all too, because I think that that's a really helpful thing for me professionally to know. So happy to take any questions from y'all.
Excellent. Thanks, Ryan. That was great. Any questions for Ryan?
I do. There has been a lot of things in the news about the administration giving rights to corporations to blow up the Grand Canyon, or all these different, these are crazy. I mean, does CAP weigh in on those kinds of things? I mean, I'm astounded that that's even a possibility. But again, you know, I personally do not believe in making public land private, okay? I understand, you know, partnerships and funding and so forth, but I struggle with that, especially where here in Charlotte, there are different groups that, again, development and so forth, that they want to take public land and make it private, and I just struggle. And when you see it on a grand scale, like in other places, I'm just curious of CAP's position, or if they have one on that.
Yes, certainly. We've been engaged in that issue, the uranium mining. There had been a withdrawal on areas around the Grand Canyon, and discussing lifting it, right? And that's, you know, certainly not something that we're supportive of. And I think that there's also a lot of investment that like folks have made on the ground, just like to elevate what is happening to communities in, say, like Navajo country, for instance, which is where a lot of the impacts of uranium mining tend to have their health consequences. You know, that I think we try to point out that this is not necessarily something that's supported by folks who are on the ground, understanding that, you know, you do resources, but there's ways to go about it that don't involve cutting the public out of it, especially the people who are going to be disproportionately impacted by that type of decision. There's other areas where, you know, like leasing for oil and gas on federal lands right now, and also some of the rule changes that have been moved forward, there are still, it appears to be a lot of momentum to try to close those out, even though no one can really comment right now because we're in the middle of a pandemic. And you know, just pointing out that some of these things, like, you know, are could be a little bit more inclusive than they are, I would say.
I have a question for you, Ryan. Can you hear me?
Yep, we can hear you, Cassius. Go ahead.
So the last meeting we had, we had some presenters that talked a lot about urban agriculture.
Mm-hmm.
And you know, when listening to the gentleman speak earlier today about, you know, there's something, a lot of things are changing, and some things they don't want to see change, like, you know, being on the farmer's land, you know, and talking conservation with him right there. It's kind of like the foundation of the organization NACD, kind of like started off with NRCS. And so if you're only as strong as your weakest link, and things are changing now, we've all seen that when something tanks, something else is growing fast. And But if this is something new that we're not used to, you know, this coronavirus and all the different effects it has on the community, then what is it that's, you know, spiking in this area? And, you know, when you talk about rural development, you know, it can't help me but think that even in a place of like New York City, for example, that we don't look as being rural, but in a sense, it may be rural to things that we don't look at as happening there. So, for example, I guess the best way to explain it, if you went down to the rural development office and you said, look, I could use a tractor or some kind of machinery or something in the middle of New York City because I'm planning on being a producer there, they were like, well, you don't meet our qualifications because it's not a rural area. But if you twist that and say, you know, the area may not be rural, but the need there is rural. You know, the growing produce is rural there. So support that, like let's flip this because of these changes and support the need of what has to happen in an area like that. I don't know if you understand what I'm trying to say. But
I think I do, maybe, and let me just like, just to clarify, like, is that a little bit of a thought that was triggered by the Rural America kind of initiative, that the sort of cross-pollination thing I mentioned there at the end? Yeah. So I think that one of the reasons that you know, we did this was certainly so that folks in our own teams started to talk to each other about what we were all working on in rural places. But I think that also, you know, we don't appreciate the diversity of rural America, and I think that's especially tough in places where if someone, say, has spent their life living in a suburban or an urban place and sort of assumes that it's all corn country 100%, like, you know, rural parts of the Central Valley have much different needs from, like, say, like the blues there that Ray's got in his background, right, or anything like that. So there's, I think that in a sense, it's meant to try to think about rural as something besides like a monolithic thing. But I also appreciate, and we certainly do, you know, like, appreciate the fact that that it's all like a gradient, right? It's not like a cut and dry distinction that you make. And I'm not sure if that totally answers your question, because I'm not catching that, like, I'm not fully answering that last part about like rural development and like whether someone qualifies for support depending on where they are. And that might be like in practice a bit further in the weeds than they let us get at CAP, although I like that stuff. But hopefully that is a helpful context for what I meant by that.
Can I add to that?
Yeah, please.
Sorry, I don't mean to jump in on your time, but because you mentioned sort of this dynamic of when there's a challenge in one part of agriculture, is there some opportunities in others? What I can tell you is they're talking to a lot of our customers who are on the outskirts of an urban area, like right outside of Austin or right outside of Atlanta. Some of these folks that have diversified operations where they're doing CSAs or their model is already direct farm pickup to more urban populations. Even if some of their business had been to restaurants, or even if 50 or 60% of their business has been to restaurants, the way that they're set up, they have really easily been able to shift into direct to consumer sales. And I talked to a couple of folks who I approached to be on a panel for us about specialty crops, and they were like, I'm not comfortable being on a panel because we're doing so well right now, we're turning customers away. So there are bright spots here of folks that are being really nimble, really adept at responding to consumer needs and wants. And a lot of that is happening right next to very urban centers.
That's exactly what we have here in Mecklenburg County. Exactly what you described, right?
Yeah.
And it's right, wrong, or indifferent. It's almost like, why waste a good pandemic? I mean, when this has occurred, the food system came to light, and these small farmers that are doing regenerative whatever, and the CSA just skyrocketed. And so, but they still have huge needs, huge needs, and that's where I guess all the other dynamics that you introduced come into play. And there are many that, for whatever reason, don't think they qualify. The Cassius, this is what your point. They don't think they qualify for some of the NRCS programs for whatever reason, and they probably do, right? And so this has presented an opportunity for us to reach out and bring the resource and say, you do qualify. You can get this loan, or you can't, what have you. It's very interesting.
One of our cohorts, Sam, is actually living this.
Yes, she is.
Invite Sam to unmute and give us a little update on how things are going at your place.
Yeah, so I have a waiting list of people trying to get beef. I mean, cows only grow so fast. You can only process so many. The hard part is getting butcher dates for things. I raised 1,200 chickens last year. I'm up to 2,800 chickens already this year. So yeah, I mean, we're right outside of, I'm stuck between Cincinnati and Dayton. So 2 really big cities. People have figured out that the grocery stores aren't able to supply their needs. So they're coming to me, and me and a couple other local farmers are doing our best to get people what they need. I've partnered with some people who raise pigs, an Amish family who raises grass-fed lamb, and so have been started that partnership with them to be able to get everybody what they're looking for. So yeah.
And exactly what my point is, that you know, supply and demand. If there's a lot of people that see what you're doing and they want to help and want to be able to do that as well, and we're lacking in other areas, or we have a supply of, you know, tools that we're not using, then why not give it to these folks that could use this and want to be involved? And because that message is going to even spread even further, and we get more people understanding conservation, understanding what clean water and clean soil is all about. And again, it's just opening up those doors for them. I'm sure that, you know, and I see the same thing here, and I can tell you the folks here are exhausted, you know, and I've said, well, if somebody is exhausted, then that means there's room for more growth. There's room for more. And there's still people going without, and there's still people that, you know, want to get involved to help, or if it's just for their own benefit. But regardless, they're going to learn. They're going to learn more about what we do and what we offer.
Excellent. Okay, yeah, great content and great discussion. Coleman, we would love to be able to hear your insights on some of this stuff too. So we'll shift to you now. We're a little behind, but we look forward to hearing what you have to say.
Great. Happy to join y'all. Again, I'm Coleman Garrison. I am the Director of Government Affairs for the National Association of Conservation Districts. Been here right around 4 years now, spent some time on Capitol Hill working for various members doing ag work, and transitioned over here when my boss decided to retire in 2016, which for anyone else in the DC world who has worked on the Hill knows that you're only there as long as your boss is either winning or deciding to run. So really enjoyed my time at NACD and really enjoyed the chance to talk with y'all today. Like I mentioned, I've worked with several of y'all in various capacities through NACD, and my presentation will be maybe a little bit different because we are your Conservation District's National Association. We are here to represent you and your views and policies and needs. Certainly my presentation will be a little different than it would have been 2 or 3 months ago, as everyone else's has, and I'll probably try to go a little quickly just to kind of hit some of the high points, but really just want to spend some time with y'all talking about kind of what NACD focuses on generally, what we've been working on lately as it relates to the kind of the COVID-19 crisis, and kind of how we utilize our grassroots efforts and y'all on the ground, our board members, our districts, our state associations, to help you advocate on your behalf, but also to help educate us and then thus educate members of Congress and people in the administration like NRCS and FSA about the things that y'all need on the ground. So give me just a second. Let me share my screen. Has that worked for y'all?
Not yet.
Not yet.
No.
Oh, there we go. I didn't actually click share. That's probably helpful.
Okay, it's coming into view now.
We good?
Yeah, there we go.
Okay.
And before you start, I'll go ahead and remind everybody to mute yourselves so that we've got a little clear background.
Okay, great. So I was going to spend some time kind of just as your National Association doing a quick civics lesson about what we do, how the policy process works. I'll kind of do that quickly. As y'all know, House, Senate works together with the administration to pass laws. You'll hear a lot recently about the House passed a bill to help the COVID crisis, and the Senate's not doing it, or the Senate's doing this. So this process here is in an ideal world. Things are moving much differently than normal, but you have the basic legislative process helping you work with your members of Congress, as well as the executive process, which is where Kevin Norton is housed and where we do public comments and working with it to make sure the programs passed by Congress are working the best for you. So for y'all, advocacy is really just telling Congress what's important to you. As you've heard a couple times already from other organizations, someone is always advocating on behalf of their members. They may not be advocating for what districts need or want, so it's important to make sure your story is being told. And probably the most important thing that I'll communicate through this entire thing is that relationships matter more than people think. Relationships where a member and their staff know what districts are. That's sometimes very much the first thing that we have to do, is educate folks what are conservation districts. Because sometimes the problem is they call them soil and water conservation districts in one state and resource conservation districts in another state. So they have to ask, is that what you're referring to here? And then one thing we've definitely run into recently is educating folks that districts are government entities. We are local units of government as created by state statutes, which provide certain benefits, but also some potential hurdles and roadblocks as Congress is looking to pass things to support folks on the ground. And rural America certainly is more and more running into issues where they do not have as much representation in Congress. And for the most part, our members are located in rural America, and even in places where they are maybe more suburban and urban, with the growing need of urban agriculture and direct-to-consumer agriculture, you are seeing more needs for people in Congress to know how their food is produced and knowing what happens in agriculture industry. So we're going to have in the next census a redistricting across the country. My old member of Congress represented West Texas and represented a district that is larger than 6 states, physically speaking. And in the next district, or next redistricting, that district will probably add another 3 to 4 counties, meaning that in Texas, where I'm from, you'll have the DFW in the Houston area. It's probably adding 2 or 3 members of Congress to them, while rural districts are just increasing the size, but not increasing in representation. And additionally, we see more and more that, as this map shows, the red being Republicans and blue Democrats, is that in the areas that most people consider rural America and agriculture focused, the party representation is certainly realigning, where most rural America is represented by Republicans, and most urban areas represented by Democrats. And that certainly provides different challenges when it comes to educating folks and convincing members of Congress how they should or shouldn't vote and support various issues. So why care about policy? As the Director of Government Affairs, I am leading a team at NACD to make sure that the policies and the bills and the programs that are being created or reauthorizing through Congress meet the needs of conservation districts and the unique needs across the country of different conservation districts. The Farm Bill is probably the one we spend the most time talking about and focused on. It is certainly not the only large piece of legislation or issue area. Conservation districts work a lot with interior agencies and Fish and Wildlife Service and EPA as well, but certainly the Farm Bill is probably more than anything else, the bread and butter of what we are working on, because it does authorize many of the programs the conservation districts then help implement in their local office. Kind of skip some of this a little bit, but to help kind of break down a little more of what Kevin said earlier about conservation spending in the larger farm bill, you can see in this chart projected 10-year spending from the 10-year, or over the next 10 years from the 2018 farm bill. And as Kevin saw, or as Kevin showed, the vast majority is going to the nutrition programs, the SNAP program at USDA, with commodity crop insurance and conservation programs making up a smaller point. But of the kind of farm, quote unquote, farm bill dollars, and sorry, I'm just realizing this chart is way out of whack when it comes to the graphics, but you'll see that it's about split, a third, and a third between the commodity, the conservation, and the crop insurance programs. So even amongst the very small 25% or so share of the quote unquote farm parts, conservation receives about a third of that. But that has been growing over the course of the years, and certainly the way those programs are funded within the conservation title has changed quite a bit as well. This chart shows a little bit about how conservation programs are broken down within the conservation title, or at least the spending for those. You can see 15, 20, 25 years ago, the CRP program by far was the main program that was considered a conservation program within the Farm Bill. But as direct cost share and support to farmers to implement conservation practices rather than set aside has become more popular, you've seen the EQIP program, the CSP program, the ASAP, and the RCPP program definitely start to take more of that share of the conservation title. And right now, I'd probably say the EQIP program, as we hear from conservation districts, are kind of the workhorse of the direct conservation programs out there. We also focus on appropriations, the annual budgeting cycle. Certainly that is something we would be probably spending more time on right now if COVID were not occurring. But it is still something Congress is still taking place. They are still working their way through the appropriations process, maybe not as publicly as they would have otherwise before now, but the programs that NACD cares about, the Conservation Technical Assistance Program, the EPA 319 program, all have to be paid for annually through the appropriations process in order for them to continue at those respective agencies. So making sure that we are communicating to Congress what those needs are and how much money we think is appropriate is something that is always taking place, and something we would have been equipping y'all to do during our fly-in had that taken place. But I want to also really quickly brief y'all on our NACD policy process. Since y'all are all local supervisors, some of y'all are board members. I think kind of the large 30,000 foot picture of what we hope out of this NGLI process is that we are, again, equipping the future leaders of conservation districts and the future leaders of NACD to be more aware and to be better educated on what NACD is doing, and kind of, at least from the DC aspect of things that I worked on, why we do what we do and how we go about doing what we do. So NACD relies on our grassroots policy process to work on various programs. When someone comes to me and says, we are thinking of introducing this bill that would do X, Y, Z, we literally do refer to our policy book and find areas that either supports or opposes what that bill would do, or what that program would do, or what that idea would do. And those policies are developed at the local level and can be offered by states, one of NACD's 7 regions, or a foundation committee within NACD in order to be considered by the various foundation committees and the full board at our annual meetings each winter. Policies can be responding to a current issue, such as EQIP isn't working in my area because of XYZ and NACD should support changing it, or it can be a general statement that NACD supports cost share programs. Both can be beneficial as we work on various policy areas in Washington, DC, but as we sometimes run into, policies must deal with conservation in some sort of context. That can sometimes be difficult when our members, who are many times farmers themselves or involved in the agriculture industry, want us to work on a type of agriculture policy if it doesn't have to do with conservation, as NACD is there to represent the districts themselves, while we are, of course, generally supportive of agriculture and much of the work that the other presenters have already talked about here, we do try to keep to our lane as much as possible and focus on conservation-related issues. And certainly you can make an argument that so much of it has to do with conservation. If farmers aren't able to keep their books in order and stay operating, they're not going to be able to implement conservation practices, and who knows what may happen to that land. But we do try to stay within our lane because we do view ourselves as the experts, generally speaking, on conservation programs across the country. We don't focus on just wildlife or just ranching or just grasslands. We focus on everything under the sun when it comes to conservation. So when a policy is passed, NACD is responsible for implementing that, whether it's trying to get a letter written, a bill introduced, a program changed, whatever that route is, NACD is tasked with doing that. But it is a conversation between the local and national level. I can say right now we are in the middle of implementing policies that are passed in our annual meeting in Las Vegas, and I am reaching out to the states on the ground that originally implemented this to figure out what they want done. I'll wrap this up in the next 2 or 3 minutes, Sunny, for y'all. But in a normal time, advocacy is meeting in DC, setting up a tour back home to show your members and maybe even your local county commissioners and your state legislatures what it is you are doing. Relationships are vital. I love when I talk to maybe a state executive director or a state board member and they say, hey, I can go email or I can call Bob in Senator Blank's office about this. I can be your best advocate in the world in Washington, D.C., but having that local expertise and having someone who has the local knowledge and actually working on the land to say the same thing is vital to me being able to do what I'm doing, because they give me credence and what I'm doing is the right thing. And then on the executive side, participating in public comments is also vital, as NRCS has worked over the last 6 months or so, releasing public comment periods for the various programs and having districts respond what's working and what's not. So in the current, what we're working on, I think the biggest challenge we've had at NACD is not so much figuring out what districts are working on, but really figuring out what districts, how they are funded and how they are created. Many times we found that programs like the Paycheck Protection Program don't work for conservation districts because they are not small businesses, they're not nonprofits, they are local government entities and are not eligible. The tax credits for family and sick leave that were passed in I think the third or the second stimulus package, not eligible for local governments, which means districts are not eligible for that. So really trying to kind of brush up on our knowledge of kind of what districts are, because we do a good job knowing what they do and how they work with landowners, but kind of just the structural form of what districts are has been a challenge. But also helping coordinate conversations, again, between local districts and state associations and their members of Congress. We had a kind of virtual fly-in when this was all first starting, encouraging folks to reach out on our normal appropriations requests and normal issues. But really over the last month and a half, we've really also been trying to encourage districts and state associations to keep up conversations, let your state representatives, or let your states, your senators and your representatives know, here's what's happening with districts in my state. We are funded mostly by the county or mostly by the state, or in some cases, we're not funded at all by the county or the state. So these are the challenges, these are the pressure points we are dealing with as we are trying to continue to meet our mission to deliver conservation on a local level. So we are continuing to kind of keep those conversations going. Certainly if any of your states or districts want help or ideas, I'm happy to talk with any of y'all about that. But I'll probably end it there. Hopefully I didn't go too long, Sunny. Happy to answer questions, but again, as y'all's national association to represent you, we just want to continue to be there for you, to be a resource to help advocate on behalf of yourself.
Thank you, Coleman. Any questions for Coleman? Barbara, I think You're on mute.
Got it, sorry.
Yeah, go ahead.
Okay. Can you give an example of a policy that you advocated for that ultimately, I'll say trickled down, I don't like to use that term, but down to the state level, and I'll say it's successfully. And the reason I caveat is one of the issues that we're dealing with for my board is insurance coverage. And the state statute, and our states are all different, that's what makes it interesting. The state statute specifically says that we can sue or be sued, okay? And yet, it's very unclear. No one has ever answered the question about our liability, professional liability, director's insurance, and general liability, okay? And we're sort of pushing that now with our association to try to get answers, because we have no funding. And so I'm curious if that subject has even reached your level. And if not, I'm just wondering what other issues have you been successfully been able to wrestle with and help us?
Yeah. Actually, I don't know a whole lot about that issue. I'm not sure it has reached me personally. I'm not saying it hasn't reached someone else within NACD,
sure.
But not myself personally. And that is really you mentioned one of the challenges we have, because districts were created by state statute in their individual states. Not only are they called different things, but they have different legal jurisdictions. Yes. Some states have the authority to do permits. They can do fee for service for stormwater permits. Some have taxing authority. I would say that specific concern, that may be more of a state issue based on how your state statute created North Carolina conservation districts, and what your liabilities are, and what your district may not have an insurance policy itself, but perhaps your state conservation agency's liability protections cover you. I am so far away from not being a lawyer, I couldn't really speak to much more than that, but happy to offline chat about it more.
Okay, that's fine. I just thought I would ask. We're going down that path, but it's a big deal. So.
And Coleman answered that very well. This is Ray, and I would just say check with your state conservation agency first, as Coleman has suggested.
Mm-hmm.
You're going to know whether or not you have a risk management agency within North Carolina that assists with that type of work. And if you need, Coleman, I'll offer myself too, if we need to reconnect back in with the NASCA folks, State Conservation Agency folks, Barbara, we can do that.
Yep, thank you.
Yep.
Well, let's give all of our speakers a round of applause.
Thank you. Excellent.
On our virtual, Coleman and Ryan and Jenny and Kevin, it was exceptional content and certainly relevant, and it was a nice reminder of how great it will be to actually see you in person at some point when all of this settles out and we can take a deeper dive into the work that you do. So thank you very much. So we usually transition to our cohort roundtable at this point. So speakers, if you want to step out, this is a chance for the cohort to kind of connect with each other and discuss what's going on with them at the local level. And yeah, again, thanks to the speakers. It was really quite outstanding. Thanks.
Thank you. Pleasure meeting all of you.
Thank you.
Thanks for your willingness to join us. Outstanding.
Thank you.
Okay. It's always good when the dinner party goes long, right? Wow, great stuff. I learned a lot, actually. Too. So yeah, we're running a little late, but give ourselves the time to check in with each other. And at the top of my screen, yeah, we got you number or letter B, top of the screen again, Barbara. Just our chance to hear from you and how you're going. And
oh, it's all good. I definitely feel this shift, and I think Ryan talked about it, and I mentioned it when we first met. The shift of focus on traditional agriculture to a larger national resource conversation and urban ag. I'm literally in the throes of attempting to finalize a grant, the NACD grant, Technical Assistance 2020 grant. Mm-hmm. And it's interesting the conversations I'm having with some of my colleagues, well, since NRCS is providing most of the funding. But again, the tone of they're looking for urban landscape, urban agriculture ideas, and so forth. But yet there are folks that say, oh no, they've never done that before. They've never awarded grants and they've never associated with, stormwater with, it's just very interesting. And I, of course, reject that, and I'm just going to plod along. But of course, as I looked at the winners from 2019, I see Rhode Island, and I thought of Cassius. I keep looking through for his name in there. But trying to take lessons from, how they positioned their successful grants and taking advantage of that. But I'm excited because I lost that first round. I'm not going to lose the second round. So that's what I'm literally working on, and it's due June 1st. So thank you. Awesome. Everything's good.
Thanks, Barbara. And thanks again for the connection with Center for American Progress. That was really worthwhile. Thank you. Joe.
Yeah. Hi, everybody again. Yeah, things are going well. Family's doing well. Just in the middle of farming right now, mainly taking care of the cattle. As far as on my personal front, but we're planting some soybeans, got the corn all in, and getting ready to harvest hard red winter wheat. So things are very busy. We had a little rain, so kind of made it easier to come into the office today and participate in the webinar. So that helped out a lot. But yeah, kind of as far as in the community, things are opening up here in Oklahoma to an extent. That's a little bit scary, but it's something from an economic standpoint, I think, is something we have to consider trying to make the most of and those types of things. So we went to church in our local church for the first time this past Sunday. And, there were a lot of precautions and that type of thing. So we're trying to be careful, and I think that's a good thing to do. At our local board level, I think it's still challenging. It's, we do as much communication as we can, and our district secretary has been very good to keep active and help NRCS get done some of the things they need to get done and that type of thing, partnering. But still, it feels I still feel like I'm kind of arm's reach away, and that's difficult. That's difficult. As good as these types of meetings are, it's still hard for me to feel like I'm completely all in type of thing. So, but very much appreciate this opportunity. Appreciate some great speakers today, and nice to see you all and hear you all, even if we can't be where we can really experience everyone non-virtual. But good to see everybody, and look forward to it. Okay.
Awesome. Thanks very much, Joe. How about you, Ann? Sounds like you got your hands full with a lot of your activities on the farm. Anything else happening with the district? Or?
Yeah, things are staying busy there. We're ready to bale hay, but it won't stop raining. So it's just been wet all over. And the last day it's been nice. It's been about 80 degrees, but it's too wet to get into the field. So trying to keep up with some bush hogging and all that fun stuff. But yeah, so on that end, things are moving along. Finally got to do a Zoom meeting with our board on the district level. We hadn't really been able to do that because not everybody had access. So finally got that put together. So that's been good. The governor made a lot of budget cuts this year due to this pandemic, but we were able to save the H2O Ohio Fund, which has been a huge thing here for the Federation, for the clean water, for the Grand Lake St. Mary's and Western Lake Erie Basin and all that stuff. So that's still intact. Huge success. Great leadership there, getting that done. So yeah, overall things are just busy, but plugging forward, and the state is slowly opening up. More and more things are happening every day. I know my nieces are really excited that the pools are open, but they're not allowed to go yet, but soon enough. So, yep.
That's funny.
Great to see everybody. This has been, it's easy to forget and get wrapped up in our daily lives, what's going on. And it's good to take this moment and reconnect and get back into it. So.
Great. Thank you, Sam. How about you, Phil?
Things are going well for us here in Oklahoma. The girls finished up their college for the semester, so they're excited about that. Anticipating getting the grandkids in the next week to week and a half. The only thing there is my wife will have to go through a 14-day quarantine once we get them. So we're going to have some nana time for about 2 weeks before she goes back to work. All in all, I think the governor made a decisive call with opening the state back up, and we're walking through that progress. I think we hit another benchmark on the 1st of June there, and I think it opens up to the religious entities and things of that nature. But when I'm out and about, it's about a 50-50 shot at who wears the mask and who doesn't. So it's one of those kind of things I think that we'll eventually work our way through. But a great group of speakers today. Again, Sonny, Ray, you guys are doing a fantastic job. Great to see everybody as well.
Thanks, Val. Appreciate it. Ryan, glad you arrived safely at the office.
Yes, I apologize for trying to get too much done in too little time. But as I said, we've had some challenges. Everybody has, but the most recent one's been flooding for us and pumping water back off the fields. But and of course, we don't have all the fields planted yet either, but that's just part of it. I very much appreciated the speakers today and appreciate the work both Sonny and Ray have done, just as Phil and the others have commented. You guys are rock stars. But a couple of things going on in my life. Actually had a different experience. The last week for 2 days, a video crew followed me and my family around. They're from a large equipment manufacturer that was trying to do a special series on taking the fight to the farm, and some of this work that we're doing for conservation is the reason that they were interested in my story. And so that's a great experience to try to get the message out there, but also very stressful, as you guys can imagine, having somebody follow you around for 2 days in the middle of planting season. But outside of that, I'm sure most of you saw some of the clips from the Lake of the Ozarks. As you can tell, the state of Missouri has, for the most part, opened back up, and people are making very different choices, and some are very afraid and still staying home and wearing masks and doing things, and I cannot say that they're wrong or right, but some are excited to not have restrictions in place and are treating life as normal. And so there's a wide range, and it's interesting trying to figure out where, what's right and wrong, where is the normal, or where we should be going, and that goes for church, just as Joe has said also, as we're trying to open the doors and invite people in, but not too many people because we can't crowd, and so it's interesting trying to find where that's going to land, and I'm sure it's going to continue to change. I guess the challenges for the district remain. We did actually have a board meeting last week in person. We couldn't meet, of course, in the NRCS office like we normally would, so we went to a restaurant, which is different as well. But it was good to start to conduct business in a somewhat more normal manner, and look at the looming challenges that are going to be affected, just as Sam mentioned, in the state economies. Of course, Missouri relies on a sales tax, and sales have been down, and so it'll be interesting to see how we handle that challenge and continue to pay people and yet try to get dollars to the ground. And so we're already seeing a little bit of that in that. NRCS has been somewhat aggressive in hiring some new filling positions, which is great. Of course, the soil and water district offices are the low-hanging fruit and where you find those people. And so as a result, we have lost several positions to NRCS, and because of the funding gap, it looks like some of those we're not going to rehire, at least not for a while, until we see what's going to happen with funding. So those are the challenges that everybody else is dealing with too, but I appreciate getting to see your all's faces and look forward to the day that we can actually sit back down around the table and hash out some of these problems and figure out how to conquer the world.
Awesome. It's a tall order, Ryan, but with this group, I don't doubt it for a bit. Do it. All right, Cassius.
All right. Well, I'll say that there is a lot of changes going on here in the great state of Rhode Island. And one of them I noticed over a period of time was the districts. You get to measure the strength of your districts because, I'm the youngest one on our boards, on all our boards. And I can tell you right now, I see some districts that, they really slowed down and they're doing things very carefully. Their office is closed and they're trying to work out how to get people in and out and all that kind of stuff. And another district is just, figured it out really fast, and they're going with all their virtual meetings and different things. And you're only as strong as your weakest link. So I feel like I'm kind of like a little Goldie in there. I'm trying to balance things out to make so everybody is working. But overall, I mean, we're landing the grants and we're doing great things here, and we're adapting. So I'm really pleased with that. Personal note, I probably could use a full 5 hours of sleep. That would be great. But maybe later down the road. But we're in the process of selling our home after 35 years of being here. So there's a lot of, we're downsizing. So there's a lot of stuff there that, you have to get rid of and make some tough decisions on. And your your leadership skills really come into play there, because you don't want to say the wrong things about what should go and what shouldn't. But other than that, we're this is a busy time of year for most producers. We got seedlings, we got plants, we have a lot of garden work to do, and it's just it can be it's a lot of work, but that's what we're in it for. And then the last note is I do want to take all the grandchildren out for a camp out, and I just have to be careful. I don't sleep most of the time, but I'm really excited about that. We get out there and catch some fish and do some hiking and all that kind of fun stuff. So I'm really looking forward to that time. So, but thank you. I'm glad to see everybody's okay, and good to see your faces. And those that I follow on Facebook and see how much fun you guys are having. I usually do that about 2:30 in the morning when I got a free moment. But other than that, things are great.
Awesome. Thanks, Cassius. Sounds like you have a similar playbook as me. I ran into a little bit of a problem after purging a bunch of stuff in our house. There's very few places around here right now that are taking donations.
Yeah.
Mark, where's the beach?
Yeah, came in for a break. is mighty nice. Yeah, and I've realized that if you don't turn your video on, Sonny waits till the end to call on you. So you can say things like, I agree with everything I've heard, and, echo what Samantha said or whatever. But in all seriousness, I did hear a lot of familiar things, and, dealing with a lot of the same challenges that many of you are. I guess I'll start with the personal stuff, kind of on a sad note. COVID's kind of hitting close to home. We lost my wife's grandmother about 3 weeks ago to it. And then a couple of days after that, I guess the closest thing we have to a neighbor, he got it and ultimately passed away, had some underlying stuff, but, no less sad. So, it's certainly hitting close to home on our little part of the world. And so I know a lot of folks are dealing with it. As far as the districts and the work that we're doing, I guess a couple of things really struck me. One, on the budget side, Sam talked about, they're facing some issues. Our legislature is actually going back, about 2 weeks, sometime second week of June, I think. And our governor has said, everybody go find at least a 14% cut. And frankly, I don't think that's going to touch it statewide. Honestly, that's our starting point. And if you remember back to our Vegas discussion, our districts in Georgia get basically nothing anyway. So, I guess one way to look at it, there's not much to cut because there's not much there, but I think it's going to be a tough sell for those of us from the local districts to hang on to what we have in this environment. So we're facing that. And then I guess the second thing, a little more lighthearted, Kevin, NRCS Kevin was talking about, NRCS has got a lot of newer folks coming on, and, those communication and relationship building issues they have with a lot of folks. And at the same time, we have this COVID thing happening where we're forced into this new communication world, like a Zoom call, like conference calls for our boards and all that kind of stuff. And so for our April local district meeting, we had a conference call in April, and then again last week for our May meeting. And for let me see, yeah, five of our board members, that April call was the first conference call any of them had ever participated in their life. And so it was kind of a reminder, okay, we can say these things, we have this opportunity for all these new tools and everything else, but it was like a big bold line for me, underscored, it's harder than it sounds, right? To get a handful of octogenarians to go on mute so you don't hear everything they're doing. But I do in fact think there's a heck of a lot of opportunity there. And I sent Sonny and Ray an email, maybe some stuff we can talk about later on, and how we maybe take advantage of some mentoring from those more senior people that are better at the relationship building to help some of the younger ones. And in Georgia, we have a whole flock of new NRCS employees, and so that's something we're dealing with specifically. But then maybe some reverse mentoring where some of these younger ones that have the familiarity with these tools that allow for some more one-on-one, be it virtual communication, they might can help some of the older ones not be quite so fearful of it. So I know we're pushing 3, or maybe we push past, I'm not sure, but that's about all I got from Georgia, or Florida, as the case may be right now.
Thanks, Mark. Ray, you have anything you want to share with everybody?
Oh, just looking forward to a couple more pieces of work that we need to do, Sonny. Here in the Palouse, it's still fairly easy to stay socially distanced if you want to, and we're doing that. And here in the local area, we're really, when the university comes back to town, if they come back to town this August and September, it'll be a game changer here because they've all been home. 2 land-grant universities within 8 miles of one another. But we bring the world back to these land-grant universities, life will change here in my area.
Yeah, we on social distancing. Our local district opened up for a couple hours a day because they're giving away seed packets for pollinator gardens, which I think was a pretty big hit at the local level. And I had a daughter who graduated from high school, so she got a custom mask that says class of 2020 across the front of it. So of course did not wear it. But the rest of us wore them during the ceremony. But yeah, I think all in all, everybody's just kind of holding tight. I think as far as the updates go, I did let you guys know that we do have a National Conservation Foundation Board of Trustees call tomorrow. They have a long list of agenda items that they'll be covering and this program. And so we're kind of in the process of looking at what our options are for this. I know you guys all concur with the fact that the webinar is our work, and it's the in-person stuff it brings a different feel to it. So Ray and I have been kind of working on what alternatives might be for that, and so put some energy into some concepts for them to discuss and figure out the way to move forward with that. So we are still planning on having the June webinar, and we should probably talk about a little bit. Ray, you want to add in there?
I can, and my dream would be that we would arrive at a date that I can speak with our speaker about. I've been in contact with Randy Frazier, who is a member of the Association of Public Speakers, about your desire to have a program on storytelling, 3 topics to pull out of your pocket, that sort of thing, and how to frame your public speaking and public relations. And Randy's just waiting for me to get back to him regarding the date that you all would select for this third. You selected 3 top topics, actually came up with 4. Generational differences would be our 4th, and how to deal with that. So I kind of need a sense of the group, Sunny, as to do we want to be bold and look at June and set a date on our calendar? That worked really well last time.
Mm-hmm.
And let me just offer June 30. And if June 30 would work for you, same time, same place, same everything, can I get a big thumbs up? Is there anybody that's not available on June 30 at this same time? It was 1 o'clock Eastern, right?
Yep, 1 o'clock Eastern.
Yep.
June 30 work for you?
Yep.
Yeah. Great.
Okay.
Okay,
Then
I will send out information on that. And I realized too, I apologize, you guys, I don't have the contact information for the speakers from today in the agenda, so I'll update that and send that back out. And make sure that if anybody wants to connect with any of those folks offline, they have a chance to. So I think that
we may spin into some more questions and answers a little earlier because we only have the 1 speaker. I'm also got some materials on public speaking I'd like to share with you. So it'll be just Randy and I. And so I think we're going to have a lot more dialogue, a lot more questions from you on the front end and during the entire event, and your own personal experiences, because many of you have been out in the public speaking circuit in your role and as a leader already. So we want to pull from Randy's experience, your experience, my experience, and others. And again, these are no substitutes for our in-persons. Let me go back a piece though, and Sunny, what would be your synopsis of after the Conservation Foundation meets? Will we be sharing information back out to our cohort then about whatever late breaking news we get from that meeting tomorrow?
Yeah, so Jeremy also serves as CEO of the National Conservation Foundation, and so I'll make sure that the messaging that is coming from the board is, he's got input on. So give me a couple days after that just to make sure that I'm conveying things the way it needs to be conveyed. But that would be a follow-up that I would see probably the week after that they have that discussion, the evening of the discussion.
And I know I'm going to brag on Sunny a bit, but she packaged what it was that you said and had those critical conversations with I and with Jeremy. as we headed into that. So the proposals are related to what you put into your notes back to Sunny. Each one of you, Mark included, you mentioned this earlier, you gave Sunny the options, right? It should be this, that, or the other. And, you know, put a hold on it, add 3 people, add 7 people, rerun it, you know, all of that is all under consideration. What Sunny and I are under kind of a bad spot because we can't really say, okay, we know definitively this option over another option until they meet tomorrow. So we're one day and a few days, as Sunny made mention, until she can process that with Jeremy and get back to you.
Thank you for your patience. Thank you for your input.
I wish we knew today. Wish we knew in the future what things are going on. We know the canceled July summer event. Noble hasn't been canceled though at this point yet, right?
No.
But judging from the foundation's meeting tomorrow, we'll know a lot more. Annual meeting hasn't been canceled for 2021.
New Orleans. No.
Mm-hmm. No. All right. So next month, though, we would mine your ideas about new webinars. If you want to take on more webinars, put those on hold, all of that, we would intend to have a discussion with you about that.
Yeah. Ray, do you anticipate another 2 hours as a good time period for next?
You know, we're going to hit closer to the 90 minutes next time, probably, because we don't have as many speakers. But Randy's got a lot to share with you, and you've got a lot to share with him and with one another. So that's it'll be a little bit different format than our first 2, right? Less speakers, more conversation, and more experiential things. And then just ask this guy tons of questions. He's worked with conservation districts, state associations, state conservation organizations in his years of working, but he was a parks ranger, by the way. And then went into the circuit of public speaking and motivational speaking. And some of you may have heard him in keynotes at your state association meetings and whatnot. He's really fun. You're just really going to enjoy this.
Might have to do a little bit of research and see if I can find him on YouTube.
Yeah.
Teaser.
Randy Fraser Communications. I can is his website. You'll find him there, and you'll thoroughly enjoy what you see there. He is really a fun guy to work with.
Thanks for securing him, Ray.
Some of you have maybe heard him before. Show of hands. Have you heard Randy speak before at your programs? I know I have. Went out and presented with Randy a time or two too. So, okay, good. I think we're on to something pretty good here. We know that one's going to happen.
Well, yeah, we're lucky to see you all today, and thank you all for the time and for your dedication. And I will keep you posted on the conversations from tomorrow, and look very much forward to seeing you again on the 30th of June.
Sounds good.
Okay. Right. Happy Father's Day to those fathers out there as well.
All right.
You will, folks.